I was just a little bundle of wrinkles when I first met Max, my human. He's not perfect, we'll get to that, but he's mine. From the very first day, Max and I forged an unspoken pact. I'd follow him through thick and thin, no questions asked. You know, like the time he tried to teach me to fetch a stick, a concept that frankly I've never quite grasped. I mean, I'm a bulldog, not a border collie. Fetching is beneath me, but loyalty? Now that's my thing. So I humor him. I chase that silly stick, bring it back, and watch his face light up. I'd do anything for that look. But don't get me wrong, it's not always easy. I've endured more questionable decisions than I can count on all four paws. Like that time Max thought he could cut my nails himself. He had me pinned down, muttering about saving money on a groomer, holding clippers in one hand and a treat in the other as if I wouldn't notice. I'll admit I may have snapped at him, but he was completely missing the point. Yet even then, I stayed loyal. I didn't run away or bite his fingers. Well, not too hard. I'm still here, his bulldog, a little disgruntled but devoted. Loyalty isn't just a fluffy word for us bulldogs. It's a lifestyle. Over the years, Max and I have had our fair share of, let's call them, learning experiences. Max likes to believe he's the brains of the operation. Sure, I let him think that. It makes him happy. But the truth? Half the time, I'm the one keeping us out of trouble. Like that infamous camping trip. Oh yes, I remember it well. Max, ever the outdoorsman, decided we needed a manly bonding weekend in the wilderness. He packed a tent, some cans of beans, and a map he could barely read. I looked at him with a mixture of pity and patience, my little wrinkled face saying, "Oh, Max, this won't end well." And it didn't. Within 2 hours, he was hopelessly lost. I trotted along beside him, ears perked, watching him spin that map around like it was some sort of magical puzzle. Did I have a clue where we were? Absolutely not. But was I going to leave him out there? Never. I'm his bulldog, his partner in crime, or more accurately, his partner in a series of highly questionable life choices. We finally set up camp, which, by the way, was just a fancy term for Max throwing the tent down in a way that resembled a tangled mess. But I lay there, snuggled by his side, listening to his terrible rendition of campfire songs and trying not to snicker. Even when he burned our dinner to a crisp, I wagged my stubby tail and pretended to enjoy the charred beans he handed me. It wasn't about the food, it was about loyalty. Because when you love your human, you eat burnt beans and laugh at his terrible sense of direction. Then there was the great sofa incident. Oh, Max was furious, absolutely beside himself. One afternoon I had a slight mishap. See, the sofa was just sitting there looking comfortable and expensive, and I, well, may have indulged in a little bulldog-style digging. Just a bit. Okay, I tore the whole cushion to shreds, but honestly, what did he expect leaving me alone in the living room with such a tempting target? When Max walked in, he stopped dead, his face a mix of horror and disbelief. I could almost hear his thoughts. My beautiful sofa, my pride and joy. Meanwhile, I just sat there, my eyes wide with an expression of, who? Me? But when he let out a sigh and slumped onto the remaining cushions, I knew he couldn't stay mad forever. In that moment, I crawled up beside him, nuzzling his arm. I mean, I did feel a tiny bit guilty. Just a tiny bit. He patted my head, muttering something about loyalty even in destruction. And you know what? He was right, because I'd still be there for him, sofa or no sofa. Now, if there's one thing Max should have learned by now, it's that you don't host a fancy dinner party with me in the vicinity. But Max is nothing if not optimistic. He invited a bunch of his friends over, polished his silverware, and set out some of the finest smelling food I'd ever laid my eyes or nose on. He looked at me with that pleading look, saying, "Frank, please, just behave." I gave him my best innocent look, but deep down we both knew this was going to end poorly. As the guests arrived, I took my position under the table, trying my best to keep a low profile. But then came the roasted chicken. It smelled like heaven. I tried to resist, I really did. But when one of Max's friends accidentally dropped a piece on the floor, all bets were off. Before anyone could blink, I was up on the table, inhaling everything in sight. Max's friends screamed, and Max? He just stood there looking at me like I'd betrayed him. But here's the thing. I was doing him a favor. Who wants to eat at a party without a little excitement? After he ushered the guests out, Max sat down, defeated. I walked over, nudging his hand with my nose as if to say, "Look, you'll thank me one day." And just like that, his frown melted. He couldn't stay mad. Because, at the end of the day, loyalty means loving your human, even when he has no clue how to plan a Bulldog-proof dinner party. For all the trouble I caused, there was one time when I, Frank the Bulldog, was the hero. It was late one night and Max was fast asleep, snoring loud enough to rattle the windows. Suddenly I heard a strange noise. Footsteps, quiet but unmistakable, creeping through the house. Now, normally I'm not one to get worked up, but something about this seemed wrong. So I barked, loud, fierce, and non-stop, waking Max in a panic. Turns out someone had actually tried to break in. They'd heard my barking, freaked out, and took off before they could steal anything. Max hugged me so hard I thought my wrinkles might permanently flatten out. That night, I basked in his praise. I was no longer just the sofa-destroying, dinner-party-crashing Bulldog. I was his protector. Sure, it was terrifying, but that's the thing about loyalty. It means being there in the middle of the night, keeping an eye out, even if it means sacrificing your beauty sleep. Oh, let me tell you about the vet. If there's one place I'd rather avoid, it's the office of torture, as I call it. Max, for reasons I'll never understand, thinks it's a necessary evil. So every few months he loads me into the car, telling me it's for my own good. I give him my best betrayed look, but he just scratches my ears and says, "Come on, Frank, you'll be fine." Well, fine is not the word I'd use. The second we stepped into that cold, sterile room, I knew exactly where we were. The smell of antiseptic, the haunting meows from the cat carrier beside us. I was in no man's land. Max sat beside me, humming to calm me down, but I wasn't having it. When the vet came at me with a needle, I'll admit I panicked a little. There might have been some growling involved, maybe a bit of squirming. But even through the chaos, Max was there, holding my paw, whispering, "It's okay, buddy, I'm here, buddy." When it was all over, he took me out for ice cream. I might have felt betrayed, but somehow as he fed me spoonfuls of vanilla, I forgave him. Loyalty, after all, means putting up with uncomfortable situations, even if they involve needles. Because if Max thought it was good for me, maybe he was right. Maybe. Max isn't exactly what you'd call weather prepared. So, on one particular rainy day, he took me to the park without a second thought. As the clouds darkened and the sky started pouring, I gave him the look. You know, the one that says, "Are you sure about this?" He shrugged, tossing the umbrella in the back seat. Turns out he should have kept it handy. Within minutes we were soaked, and Max tried to dash back to the car. But surprise, he'd locked the keys inside. I sat there watching him scramble, completely drenched, as he frantically tried to open the door. A lesser dog would have bolted for cover, but not me. I sat loyally at his side, shivering but unwavering, because that's what bulldogs do. We stick around, even when our humans are clearly lacking common sense. Eventually, we managed to flag down a passerby who helped him break into the car. As we drove home, Max kept saying, "Thanks for sticking with me, Frank." And honestly, that's all I needed to hear. Every dog has their quirks, and one of mine happens to be a fondness for socks. I won't deny it. There's something delightful about swiping one and stashing it away. One day Max came home after a long shift, muttering about his favorite lucky sock being missing. Now I had no idea he had a lucky sock, but it sounded important, so I figured I'd play along. He tore apart the living room, checking under cushions, behind the TV, even in the freezer. Don't ask me why. All the while I sat there trying to look innocent. Finally he plopped down beside me in defeat. I sighed, reached under the couch, and nudged the sock out with my nose. Max stared at me, realization dawning, and then burst out laughing. "Of course it was you, Frank," he said, rubbing my head. I think he half expected me to apologize, but come on. Where's the fun in that? Loyalty means keeping life interesting after all. Plus, I'd always return his socks. Eventually. Then came the day Max brought home her. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy for Max, and she seemed nice enough. But here's the thing. She didn't quite understand the bond Max and I shared. She'd give me this strange look like she was trying to figure out why I was always there, always in the picture. And admittedly, I might have been a bit possessive. What can I say? Loyalty runs deep. One evening, Max invited her over for a movie night. She cozied up to him on the couch, and I hopped up right between them. Max tried nudging me to the side, but I held my ground. Eventually, he just chuckled and let me stay. It was a victory for team loyalty, and I couldn't have been prouder. She might not have understood, but Max did. He knew that to me, he was more than just an owner. He was family. I'd protect that bond, even if it meant being a bit of a third wheel. Over the years, I've seen Max through highs and lows. From career triumphs to heartbreaks, I've been right there, a constant furry presence in his life. And it's funny. People sometimes ask why dogs are so loyal. But to me, the answer is simple. Max is my person. He's flawed, messy, and occasionally clueless, but he's mine. Loyalty means sticking with him, even on the days he's difficult, even when he's in the wrong. It means seeing him through every challenge, no matter what. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Max looked down at me, scratching my ears and saying, "Thanks for everything, Frank." I leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of my favorite human. In that moment, I knew, no matter what life threw our way, I'd always be by his side. Because that's what loyalty is. It's the promise that we'll always find our way back to each other. And as long as Max keeps that promise, so will I.